Hey everyone, Yazin here for another Flutter tutorial video. If you'd like to follow along, I've left a link to the GitHub repo in the description. YouTube tells me that very few of you are actually subscribed to my videos. Now, huge thanks to all 22 subscribers as of this moment. I memorized all your names and I repeat them till I fall asleep each night. Let's get the show started. All right, so we start where all Flutter projects start. This stupid demo right here with the push button. By the by, I finally figured out how to get the preview to show up at the same time as the code editor. It turns out you just have to set this setting. There's a specific setting called default right iPhone simulator allow full screen mode. Now I'll paste that in the comments just so that you can do this yourself if you haven't figured it out yet. Essentially allows you to tile this window to the right, which is so cool. I can't believe I finally got it figured out. Anyway, get rid of the theme crap and lose the my home page. Let's just put a container in there, and we'll go ahead and remove all of that stuff at the bottom as well. All right, let's get rid of the debug header. Cool, that's gone. Nice, and so now we are ready to start. The way I kind of view this is I'd like to start with the tabs at the bottom. So just get the tabs going, and then we'll start working on the individual screens, especially that juicy little round thing, whatever we're going to end up calling that. But anyway, we're going to start with the tabs. And so the easiest way to kind of get started with that is let's go ahead and replace this with something else. Let's say main page. I'm going to create a stateful widget for the main page. And the reason we're using a stateful widget is because we need to keep track of what the selected tab is. And so we're going to have active tab, set that as 0 initially. And that's going to allow us to know which screen is currently active. I'm also going to keep a list of screens. And right now I'm just going to put a bunch of container elements here. But essentially this would point to the individual screens at some point. And then what we'd like to do is set up our container, right? So this container down here in the middle, I'm going to set the color to the default color that we're going to use here, and it's 0F141C. I actually just picked this up from the image itself using a color picker. All right, and then you're going to hit the child. We're just going to set up, again, once more, I like having a safe area there just to make sure that everything is nice and on screen. We'll go ahead and set the background color to colors.transparent, and then set up the bottom navigation bar. And here I'm just going to call this thing bottom nav bar. Haven't created it yet, so I'm going to have to do that. Now I know for bottom nav bar we're going to have two parameters. We're going to have to pass the active tab so that whenever the active tab changes, we'll go ahead and recreate the bottom nav bar. And also we need to know when the tab has changed. And so we need to pass it a function that gets called when someone clicks on any of the bars at the bottom. And so you can think of it, if you want your bottom nav bar to be completely isolated, so basically packaged up neatly, you need to pass the click to the main element, the main component, the parent component. And you also need to recreate the bar and highlight the active tab whenever that changes. And so we're not actually keeping state within the tab itself or within the nav bar itself. We're keeping state in the parent. That's why we have the active tab up here. Anyway, cool. And so we'll go ahead and define on tab change. That's going to be pretty simple. All we need to do is take the new tab and we need to update the state. I really like this syntax a lot, especially if it's just a one-liner. Set active tab to new tab. And that's really all there is to it. And of course, when you render this, you need to make sure that the body of the scaffold, so once more here, the body of the scaffold is the current screen. So you just pass screens, active tab. Wait, what am I doing? Where is scaffold? All right, so this needs to go inside scaffold. Cool, so that looks fine. We still haven't defined bottom navbar, so let's go ahead and do that. I like doing this by creating a folder called widgets, spelled correctly. So widgets, and then within that, I'm going to go ahead and set up bottom navbar.dart. All right, this is going to be stateless, bottom navbar. Cool. And so bottom navbar, like I said, going to be very simple. All we really need to do is tell it to, so let's define the elements that we're going to receive first. So we're going to receive active tab, and we're also going to receive a function called onChange. Let's go ahead and set up the constructor field. All right, and then here we're going to define the tab icons themselves. And so this is just going to be our assets. So if you look under assets, I put in all three images. You're going to have an image for rocket. Then there's trash, leaf, and I think fire. Just make sure. Rocket, trash, leaf, and fire, right? All right, so those are our tab icons. Next, we need to build them. And so this can be pretty straightforward. Let's set up the list of tabs. And essentially what we're going to do is iterate over the icons and put together our list of tabs. So I is less than tab icons dot length, I plus plus, and all we're going to do is tabs dot add, and we're going to specify the widget. We're going to use an icon button for this. I think it'd be particularly well suited. SVG picture dot asset, and then we're just going to pass tab icons I, right? And what else are we going to do? Also, you want to pass a color based on whether the tab is currently selected or not, right? And so if I equals widget dot active tab, or really active tab, then you're going to specify the color. This is like a light gray color, E2, E3. Otherwise, you just can pass null, which means the default color. And so if you look at preview, yeah, it's got like a light, the default color is light gray, and then when it's highlighted, it's going to be a bit lighter. And so that's what you're looking for. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and import our SVG. So Flutter SVG is imported. That's the deal there. Expected defined. All right, let's go ahead and give it what it expects. Now what's going on here? All right, so we also need to specify onPressed, of course. So it's going to do nothing right now. And really what you want to do is you're going to call onChange and pass I. So whenever you click on any icon, it's going to trigger the onChange, which is wired up in the parent element. That's going to tell it to rebuild this component. So if you look at main, you can see that whenever onChange gets triggered, so onChange is wired up to onTabChange. So your onChange triggers onTabChange. OnTabChange receives the new tab and sets the active tab to new tab. This triggers a rebuild, and so this bottom navbar gets rebuilt with the correct active tab, which selects the appropriate index from across these containers. So pretty straightforward. We just need to make sure that we have the assets available. Wire things in. Our tabs array or our tabs list includes all the tabs. We just need to display that. So we'll go ahead and set up the height, set some padding as well, just off the edges. I'll do this symmetrically, set about 20 for horizontal and maybe 8 for vertical. I'll go ahead and set up a row as well. And the row is going to have children from tabs. And let's go ahead and add alignment as well. You're going to have this as space between just things. So I can see that the tabs are working properly and we can switch between the various screens. Next, we're going to work on the disk thing painter. That's this pretty little thing up here. All right, so first things first, let's go ahead and create another screen. We'll start with this first screen, which I'm just going to call device booster screen. And that's what that's going to look like. I like creating another folder, call it screens. And within that, we're going to go ahead and set up our device booster screen .dart. So pretty simple. This is going to be a stateful widget, device booster screen. Extend stateful widget. We're going to go ahead and import our material. And then coming back here, we're going to import screens device booster screen. So that's that. Now you also want to make sure that on device booster screen itself, let's go ahead and give it a, let's say color is .white, just so we know we're on the right screen here. All right, so you can see the device booster screen is white and everything else is just black, which is, well, pretty much what you'd expect, right? Cool. So coming back to our preview image here, what we want to do is create this little circle thing at the very top. That's what we want to start with. And so, you know, we had a chat about the custom painter before, and definitely going to be needing our custom painter friend to help us out with this little endeavor. And where we're going to do that, we're going to call custom paint, and custom paint is going to take a painter, and I'm just going to call this painter the disk thing painter. Not really sure what the hell to call it, but disk thing painter seems apt. Anyway, we're also going to have to pass a size to our custom paint, so I'm just going to call that 240 by 240. And so I think that pretty much covers the entire thing. Since disk thing painter is going to be big complex, I'm gonna go ahead and set it up in a widget all on its own. So disk thing painter .dart. Not technically a widget because disk thing painter extends custom painter. All right, cool. So I think we got all of the basics we need. One more thing. I did notice in the preview image that different slides have different colors. And so it's probably a good idea that we pass the gradient that we're going to need to disk thing painter. And notice that it is in fact a gradient because the color here is very different than the color here. So it's going from left to right. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to pass in a linear gradient. And the colors are going to be const color. So do FF0057. And then the other color is going to be 0xFF 150D. So these are the two colors that we're going to need, and we'll pass that over to disk thing painter. All right, so with that said, I think we've got it covered. Now we just have to define here. I'm going to define the linear gradient. We'll call this gradient. Yeah, that's what I called it there. All right, and then we're going to do disk thing painter, and that's going to take gradient. So I'll just set up the constructor over here. All right, now, of course, for the painter, we need to define the two methods that we're going to need, paint and should repaint. So this I'm just going to set as true. That's the default. And then we need to implement our paint. So at this point, if we save, all right, let's go ahead and import that as well. All right, I'll go ahead and save that. Okay, so it's working, and now we can focus on our disk thing painter right here. So the first thing you notice about this image is, again, this gradient that's happening. And you have a bunch of like tiny arcs in between. And so I was looking at this and I was thinking, all right, how on earth am I actually going to implement this? Because it's kind of tricky, right? You can create arcs, sure, but to create a gradient within the arc is very tricky, especially since each one of these arcs is going to have a different gradient. And so I thought about it differently. I thought, all right, what if we just draw a circle? So just a regular circle, and then draw the black fill in between. So what's left is going to be the gradient. The circle is going to have a gradient, and then the black pieces are what we draw as arcs over the gradient circle. And so that way you get the same effect, but essentially you're doing the opposite. Instead of painting the arcs, the colored arcs, you're just painting the black surface, if that makes any sense. So let's see how we might actually do this, right? So first thing is we set up our paint object, and then paint, we're going to set the style to be painting style dot fill, and set the width to really whatever you want. It's not going to make a huge difference. Now this is going to be interesting. So the shader that we're going to set allows us to set a gradient. You need to call the create shader method, and here we're going to call from circle, and we're going to pass a center. All right, so I haven't defined this, so I'll go ahead and do that in a sec. And the radius is going to be our side over 2, so let's go ahead and define that. So just like before, you're going to have a side, which is going to be the minimum of our width or our height divided by 2. And then the center is just going to be the offset, side by side. All right, let's go ahead and import math as well. All right, so that's going to work. And then finally, let's go ahead and give it a color. And that's going to be colors.black. That's the color of the painter that we're going to use. Because like I said earlier, we're just going to paint the places in between. Now, let's go ahead and draw the circle. Draw a circle. We're going to pass our center, our side, and our painter. So let's go ahead and save that. All right, so that looks pretty neat. It's pretty much exactly what you're hoping for. Now, before we dive into the next bit, I just want to clarify how we're going to do this. And so it might actually help if I draw this. So if this were our circle, our pie chart, and we're going to draw slices, right? We're going to draw arcs, and we said these arcs are going to be essentially black, right? So we're going to draw black arcs within this gradient-based surface, right? And now the arcs that we do, we're going to split each arc down the middle and color only one side. And so that way, when we shade one side black, the other is going to show the gradient through, which is kind of exactly what you want to happen here. Because if we just painted the whole thing black, you just get a black circle at the end, right? Because as you iterate over the circle, you're not going to have any space left for the gradient to shine through. And so that's pretty much exactly what we're going to do when we draw these arcs. So let's say we're going to go with 60 slices, all right? And before this, you want to set the shader. You want to make sure that you set your paint shader to null, because we've already drawn reset gradient. This just removes the gradient. And so when you draw, you're not going to be drawing with a gradient anymore. So let's say we want to draw 60 slices. What's then going to happen is we're going to have the angle with space is going to be equal to the 360 of the circle. So the entire circle divided by the number of slices that we have. So we're going to divide up the entire the entire circle by the number of slices that we want. That's going to give us this entire thing, the angle with the space. And then what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over slices. And we're going to draw an arc. So that much we already know. But the dimensions of the arc are going to be, so once more, we're going to set the center to center and the radius to side. So nothing's changed there. The start angle is going to be I times the angle with space. And so as we progress, we're going to start drawing at different bits, right? We're going to start drawing over here, and then the next slice is going to be over here, and then the slice after that is going to be over here, and so on and so forth until we've gone through the entire circle. The sweep angle is going to be fixed. That's just going to be angle with space over 2. That's where we're going to draw the black part. It's just going to be half this angle with space, right? Use center is going to be true because we want to draw a filled circle, and then we're going to set the paint. So with any luck, let's go ahead and see if that works. There we go. Once I hit save, you can see the beautiful masterpiece that resulted right over here. Of course, there's still something else, which is you have that center area which needs to be removed as well, right? And so what we're going to do is just draw a circle down that center. We're going to use the same center. The radius is not going to be radius because that would cover the entire thing. We would use 0.6 side. So now if I hit save, you can see that we have the beautiful end result that we were hoping for. So this is how you do the disk thing painter. How cool is that? We're able to get it done pretty quickly. Next up, we're going to do the scaffolding for the rest of the screen, as well as the dotted progress bar. With the custom painter, let's go ahead and set up the rest of this screen over here. So just the scaffolding for the title, this text down the middle, and make space for these 2 sections at the bottom, as well as that button right down there. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to start at the very top. Let's set up some padding for the entire thing, just so we have some space, some breathable room. So this is going to be 25. You can see that it doesn't line up all the way to the edge. You do have a bit of space, and so that's what that's going to be for. Next up, we'll go ahead and wrap our custom paint with a column. Typically, you see columns being used, either a column or a list view. I'm going to go ahead and use cross-axis alignment, cross-axis alignment dot stretch. So just to make sure that we get the full width of the screen. And then we're going to set up our sized box right there. Just give it a bit of space from the top, maybe 40. All right, that looks nice. Let's add some text as well. That's going to be device booster. Style, text style. All right, that's going to be white. Font size maybe 26. And definitely want that bolded. All right, there we go. And we'll make sure that that gets aligned to the center. All right, nice. Let's add a bit of space just underneath that. Cool. Now here for custom paint, you want to make sure that you have the text right down the center. And so the way you're going to achieve that is by using we're going to wrap the entire thing with a stack. And the stack is going to have children, and you're going to have your custom paint be one of those children. And it's probably a good idea to wrap the entire thing with a sized box as well, just so that you fix the height at least, because you want to make sure that it's centered properly. All right, so let's go ahead and set the alignment on this to center. So everything's nice and centered. And then, yeah, so that's custom paint. Go ahead and set text up. It's 1.7 GB. Again, we're going to need some text styling. So probably the color. Font size is going to be a bit smaller than font weight. That's going to be bold. There we go, perfectly centered. So now for the rest of this, we're going to have quite a bit of space, and then we'll put in those two sections at the bottom. So underneath the stack, all right, so here we're going to have a row, and we're going to put in our memory. So you're going to have some custom styling there. There's probably 300. All right. Sized box with width of 10. After that, we're going to have the text as well. This is going to be 1.9 GB. All right, so the color is going to be that. Font weight is going to be bold. And let's give it a slightly smaller font size, maybe 16. I think that'll work fine. Yeah, it looks all right. Now, of course, the last part of the text is just going to be all the way on the right. And so you can achieve that by simply using an expanded here. And you use the same text as before. So that's going to be like 67%. And make sure to set the text align to right. Yeah. And let's go ahead and set the style as well. I think styles could be pretty similar to this bad boy here. So let's just do that. Save that. Yeah, looks all right. Looks all right. Maybe make it slightly larger. Yeah, that's better. Cool. All right, so at this point we're done with this part here. I think we've got the structure that we're looking for. But next, what you want to do is this dotted progress bar. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and set that up. All right, so dotted progress bar time. Let's go ahead and set that up. Now that's going to be below the row. I'm going to once more create another widget for this dotted progress bar. And let's think about it. What things are we going to need for this progress bar? So we know we're going to need the progress. We're going to need to know what the progress is. In this case, it's going to be 67%. So maybe 0.67. That's a good value to pass. And I don't know about you, but I can see that there's a bit of a gradient here going on as well. So it's going from one color to another color. So it seems like, yep, you guessed it. We're going to have to pass a gradient in as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this gradient that we had from before. Because again, like the gradient actually varies, from one to the other, because this gradient is different than that gradient. So make sure that you got the right gradient, right? So that's what we're going to do. And I think that's it, progress and the gradient. So once more, we're going to go back to widgets and set up our dotted progress bar. .dart. So this is going to be a stateless widget. Dotted progress bar. All right, let's go ahead and import material. And all right, so let's see, what are we gonna do? Well, first thing is we need to accept the parameters. We said we're gonna have a number that represents progress. We're also gonna have a linear gradient that's going to represent, well, I'm just gonna call that gradient, right? And then we're gonna do dotted progress bar. So take key, this dot progress, and this dot gradient. Just gonna call super key. All right, that's our constructor out of the way. Now, let's see, how are we going to build this? Well, there's a couple of things. I think the obvious way to kind of build this would be to just use a painter the same way we've been doing across all of our previous examples. And that is kind of obvious, right? You just take the space and you divide it, you draw circles for each one of those, and the color for each circle will be different. That's okay, that's pretty straightforward. So I think that would be like the really obvious way to do this. But I wanted to try a different approach, just so I'm not always using the same thing. You can see alternative approaches that we can use to get the same thing done. So what I've done is I've got, in my assets directory, I've got a dot. And the dot is essentially just a circle with the color C4, right? And I'm gonna use the same dot to actually draw the entire progress bar using an image. So we're not gonna use any painters at all. We're just gonna use this dot, and we can assign a color to this dot commensurate with its position on the progress bar. So I know it sounds pretty out there, but this is an alternative approach that you can use to get stuff done. Now, in order to get this working, what we need to know is the actual width of this progress bar, which we don't know by default. The way you would typically do this is you would take so you'd assign a global key to the element itself, and then you would use that to request the size context. But it's kind of overkill for this example. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use this thing called a layout builder. Let's do that again. Layout builder. All right, builder context constraints. And then here we're going to pass a method. So within this constraints object, we can actually find the size. And so you can, let's say, all right, let's figure out, we're gonna have this progress bar. Let's figure out the size of each individual dot that we want to use. I'm gonna call this single dot width. That's essentially gonna be 12 plus the space after the dot. Maybe we give it some right padding. So give it like 4 pixels right padding. The maximum number of dots that we can have is going to be constraints.maxWidth. This is the maximum width of this progress bar right here, the width of that progress bar divided by the single dot width, right? The number of dots that we're actually going to print is going to be a function of the progress. So that progress number that we assigned initially, which is between 0 and 1, right? That's this number in our device booster screen, which we assigned 2.67. Let's go ahead and import that. So it's going to be this 0.67 times, you guessed it, max dots. And then I'm going to do a dot floor. And what dot floor means is if you have some change, right? If it's 3.5, for instance, dots, then we're just going to print 3 dots. And that just kind of makes sense. Next, I'm going to set up the list of dots. This is going to be an empty list right now. And we're going to do a for loop where we just go through each of the dots and we add them to the list. So I++, and then I'm going to set up a %. And now we're going to add, so I'm going to tell you a little bit, many of you might not actually know this, but in order to actually color the individual circles differently, we can take the starting color and the ending color from our gradient. And then what we could do is we could interpolate, which is a fancy word for saying, basically figure out a point on that gradient based on the specific progress that we're at. So that's what this PC is for. We say, all right, which dot are we printing right now? And, find out that position relative to the maximum number of dots. So that gives us the point on the line. And then we interpolate the final color based on that point, the starting color and the ending color. I'll show you exactly how that works. So we're going to add to our dots. And what we're going to add is, we'll start with padding since that's pretty much obvious. We said we're going to add a right padding of 4. And then we're going to add a child. So that's going to be our SVG picture.asset. And then here we're going to put in our dots. And also we want to set a color. So this is the tricky part, right? There's this method on color called lerp, which sounds kind of freaky, but essentially lerp allows you to do linear interpolation of colors. You just have to give it the starting color, the ending color, and the percentage. So our starting color is going to be gradient. Gradient dot color is 0, gradient dot color is 1, and PC. All right, cool. And so now we just have to return our dots. So right now it's complaining because it's empty, but let's go ahead and fix that. So, all right, that's our for loop. So next we're going to return a container. Give it a bit of padding, engine sets. Let's do vertical 3, horizontal 4. And just so you know what I'm doing here, I'm actually creating this container here, which is going to have a slightly darker background and a bit of a curved edge, a curved border radius. And that's what's going to hold all of these dots. All right, so it's got some padding, decoration. That's going to be box decoration. And we're going to give it a color of, say, just black. And the border radius, that's going to be border radius dot circular, and then maybe, I don't know, 10. All right, and then the child of this container is going to be a row with all of our dots. Go ahead and save that. All right, there we go. Is that not the most beautiful progress bar, dotted progress bar you have ever seen? Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So now we go back and just set a bit of, let's make it look a little bit better. Let's add a sized box here. Give it a height of, say, 20. So there's a bit of space between them. So that looks, yeah, that looks about right. And then we can go ahead and do the same for our storage down there. So I'm just going to copy the entire section, actually. So this whole thing. Just going to paste that there. All right, and then replace memory with storage 12.75 GB. So that's going to be storage 12.75 GB. And that's going to be 25%. And this is going to be 0.25. The colors are obviously going to be different. We're going to use the green shades now. That's CAE12C. And the other color is going to be 5, it would be F2A. So there you go. See what that looks like. I think we need this to be 70. 70 seems like overkill. I think 50 is closer. Yeah, that's about right. So there you go. That's it. We got this entire thing taken care of. So you can see what that device booster screen looks like with the disk thing indicator as well as the dotted progress bar. Final part left is to just create the beautiful button down there at the bottom and finish up the remaining screens. I realized that I hadn't added the width property here to set the dot width, the single dot width, which is why it came up a bit short. But once I actually do set the width, you'll notice that it properly reflects the progress on the bar itself. So just a little note there. Now, we're done with dotted progress bar, and we've got the first screen kind of taken care of. The only thing that's left is the button at the bottom. So let's go ahead and do that. First off, we're going to put a bit of space, let's say 40, and then we'll create our button. We'll start by adding a center widget with a container. Now, the reason we add a center widget is because the container itself will take up the entire space. And so using a center widget allows us to properly manage that so that it doesn't take up the entire space. So color is going to be colors.black. The size is, font size is 18, and the weight is font weight.bold. So that's a text. You can barely see it there at the bottom, but we're not done yet. So let's go ahead and add some padding here. Symmetric, we're going to put 40 on the horizontal side and then 20 vertically. The important part now, decoration. Now here we're going to be using a bunch of properties, border radius being an important one. That's just going to be a circular border. Say 99, basically want a fully circular border. We're going to set a gradient as well. This is going to be a linear gradient. And once more, so we're going to set the begin to top left. We'll notice top left. And want to make sure that the end is bottom right. So you can notice in the image that it starts from top left and ends at bottom left. So bottom right. So just a good idea to set that up. And then the colors, of course, we need to set those. So colors is just going to be a list. And here we're going to set the first color, which is just FF0057. And the other is just going to be FF150D. All right, so there we go. It's a sweet looking button right there. Basically set up as a container, not a flat button, and it kind of gives you the effect that you're hoping for. So it looks pretty similar to that, I'd say. And so with that said, we're done with the first screen. The rest is just going to be modification on this same setup, and I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. So going back to main, we're going to work on, well, one note though, we do have the junk cleaner, which is the second tab, and the battery saver screen, but we don't have that last one. My man Andre doesn't appear to have had time to set that up. And so Andre, if you're listening to this, I'd love to get that last screen so we can get the full experience right here, the full entire experience. And so that'd be great to have. Next up, I'm going to do that second tab, junk cleaner. So once more, set up the screen first as junk screener clean. Whoa, what am I saying? Junk cleaner screen. Right. Import material. And probably take, a bunch of these things. I just copy the entire page and remove the I'm really just going to, I'm just going to copy the entire device booster screen and just replace this junk cleaner screen. All right, and then here, what I'm going to do, and obviously you need to make sure that we're referencing junk cleaner screen here, and that's properly imported, and it is. Great. So now we can head back to here and just make sure that we remove the bits that we don't need. So the title is going to be junk cleaner. And let's see what else. All right, the text itself is going to say 2.5 GB. So that's going to be 2.5 GB. We're going to get rid of, so you can keep the row at the top. I would get rid of the dotted progress bar all the way down. We'll keep the button at the bottom as well. So let's hit junk. So hit refresh, so we're looking at it. All right, so that's the junk cleaner screen. You can see the tab there. So phone cache 820 MB. You can get rid of the percentage down here. Basically, what is that? 820 MB. Yeah, I mean, it's repeated a couple of times, so we could probably do something about that. So 820 MB, and we can wrap that with an expanded. So that way you don't have to need a sized box. And of course, just make the text alignment work. So line, you make sure that's text align right. Okay, there we go. And that's going to be, so that's the entire row, and underneath it you're going to have that sized box. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to replace that with a method, so we can call it entry. So it's going to return, all right, so it's going to return a list of widgets, and it's going to take a title and value, call it whatever you like. And that's just going to return a row in a sized box. And that's going to include the title. This is going to have the value. All right, so I think that's it. And then here, you really just need to add the 3 dots, set your title to memory, and then set your value to 820 MB. Should be good to go. So now we can just add up the rest of them. So you're gonna have, well, it's not even memory, it's phone cache. All right. This is gonna be APK files. A94. There we go. Put a bit of space here. And I think we got it. Of course, instead of boost, that should say clean. All right, so that's the junk cleaner page. You can see the entire thing just looks very, very neat. Very neat and clean. I love this design by my man Andre. So one screen left. We've got the battery saver screen. Again, very similar to this screen, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy this one. At this point, we're really just repeating ourselves. Not using progress bar. All right, head back to main and make sure to update it. All right. And just update titles. It's a bit different because here we're going to use, so again, disk thing painter, this time it's green and it has a percentage. So we just have to change the colors here. Instead of FF, we're going to be using CEE12C and 00B328. So that's going to give you the greenish shade. And you can see it if you look here and do a quick refresh. All right, so you can see what that looks like. It's going to say 87%. All right. And also you have, so instead of text, you have these checkbox things. Again, I don't want to build a custom widget for this. I'm just going to use the standard widget that we have available. I'm going to use a boolean here to indicate whether it's available, whether it's checked or not, and adjust brightness. And there's disable GPS, and finally optimize battery. So I think they're all true, except for disabled GPS. That's false. So we'll go ahead and update entry here to take a bool. And instead of using text here, I'm actually going to use a switch, specifically a Cupertino switch, since that's what the, and we're going to pass the value here. You can also set our own styling to the switch. So we'll set the active color to that grayish color, E0, E2, E3. And I'll set the track color to just black. And unchanged is required. I'm not really going to do anything with unchanged. So you can see what that looks like. And obviously it's missing the expanded. What I'll do is I'll just set the expanded, instead of putting it on the switch, I'll go ahead and put it on the text itself. So that way it's all going to get right aligned here. So I think that looks all right. It's not exactly the same as that one over there, but I think it's doable. The gradient for the bottom is something we still need to adjust. So let's do that. The button at the bottom. So yeah, let's just copy paste these two colors here. All right. So that's what that looks like. I'm going to call this optimize. And yeah, I'd say we're done. This covers the 3 screens. We got to a point where we've implemented all of the tricky bits. There's probably some optimizations that we can do to make it look really pristine, like, you know, create a custom control for the switch so it looks exactly like Andre's design, and add a bit of a glow, because I can see there's a bit of a glow on each of these. I'm going to leave that as an exercise for the reader, or maybe we can do it in the next video. So if that's something you want me to walk into, I'm happy to do that too. But with that said, we've covered all of the different parts of this exercise here, implementing Andre's video. We've got the thing, the disk thing painter over here. We've got the dotted progress bars, these juicy buttons right there, and of course the nav bar, the bottom nav bar here, and everything just works perfectly